Do I start? All right, okay. Ooh, that's interesting. Oh no, okay. Something happened there. Okay. Anyways, right. Hi, I'm Krystof. Hello, everyone. I see some familiar faces. Hi, everyone. Also to those whom I don't know and who don't know me. We just released our first game, and there's a lot of talks about we released our first game. Let's take a look at the numbers. This is not going to be specifically one of those. This is going to be a talk where I'll go through our journey, sort of, through the prism of what we experienced and specifically the little things that we think could be valuable for other small micro teams. All right, so before I get going and start going through the processes and the lessons that were there, I need to introduce three things very quickly so that we've got the full context. First thing is me, that's me, Krystof Klestil. I'm a co-founder of Mad Cookies, game designer, 3D generalist and programmer. There's an asterisk because I don't think actual programmers would think I'm a programmer, but it works. Right, and the Mad Cookie Studio. So we're based in Bratislava, Slovakia. We founded the company in 2020. We started with mobile games. We went down the rabbit hole of also working on hyper-casual prototypes, working with publishers in the hyper-casual space. And then we moved on to PC premium games. That was half a year ago, no, a year and a half ago. And members, well, at the very beginning, as our team formed, there were 6 of us, right? That was then. Now there's 3. That's also the reason why I'm a programmer now. Oh, well, I wouldn't call myself a programmer, but I program. I know they're different things. Right, and the last thing to introduce is the game Cardbob. That's the game we released. It's a 3D action roguelike. There's a lot of those. It's a game set in a sci-fi cardboard universe. Cardboard is an important word there. It's a game where you fight, sell, and you grow stronger right afterwards. That's the loop. It's fairly straightforward. It's a hack and slash. It was released on PC. We'll be releasing on GOG soon. It just keeps on getting exciting. You release something, and you keep on meeting new things that you can be doing to your already released game. That was August 31st, by the way, on Steam. And then originally, it was called Cardbob Revival. And that's the first lesson, well, the first thing that we noticed. But first of all, there's 3 GIFs of the game so that you know roughly what the game looked like. I don't want to spend too much time on it. But yeah, in the first one, you're on a street where you've got the shop. Then the second one shows the fight. And the third one shows you haggling away the items that you found. Now, first of all, the first lesson that we took away after this entire experience, right? So the whole thing took a year and a half. We went and we pitched to about 75 publishers. We kept on communicating with them. And the first thing that when I come back to it that I notice now is from their reactions, from when I put it all together, we knew, but we didn't want to really accept the reality that this is probably not going to be the most exciting game for a publisher. At that time already, we could have known, we could have pivoted, we could have done something else. Second thing, is the name is Revival. That was the original name, right? So it's a roguelike. So it's a place where you go, you die, and you revive. So we thought, right, you're reviving, so let's call it Revival. Literally everyone thought that we're just resurrecting an old game, that the game previously existed. And so we're like, okay, all right, we hear you. Let's put that away. But it was still a thing that we learned. It was a thing that we had to go back to and that we had to change. And then even now, a year and a half later, so it's been a year after we first opened our Steam page, we still have issues with the previous name. It just keeps on popping up. All right. Now then, I'll split it into 4 different parts. First, we'll talk about the team publishing the game, the processes, and motivation. Some are longer, some are shorter, but I know that we're running a little late, so I'll cut it a little shorter as well. These things are going to be looking at the things that went well and the big lessons that we are taking away onto our next project. This is an important context because there might be some of you that are in a similar situation, and there might be useful things that we went through so that you don't have to be going through those as well. So, in terms of the team, at the end of the day, when you're working with 3, 4 people, actively just 2 people, you turn into a hyper-efficient, tight-knit team, meaning that everyone knows everyone. You all have clearly communicated direction. You're like these oiled cog wheels in a machine. Everyone's turning in the right way. You're really tight there. You also know very specifically, to the smallest detail, the strengths and weaknesses of one another. A massive advantage this brings to any creative process, developing a game, is that when you're thinking of a task, you already know what parts are going to be taken care of by who. And then you can also go and expand on the limits of one another. And communication is key. The style of communication matters. We all know it. When you start working with friends, it gets really hard because, you talk to them as if you were still just talking over tea, but suddenly there are tasks and things to do. And then you may come off, this is something that I struggled with. I thought, right, we've got tasks, and then I started sounding far too official. I did sound it stern almost. So I had to go back and reiterate on the way I communicate. And then ends are new beginnings, right? So as you saw, this is a massive takeaway for us. As you saw, we went from 6 to 3. And every time a person leaves, it means that there is an element in your studio that has a core competency. They are a part of the machine, and out of nowhere, they just disappear. And you have to work with this. Commonly, this is thought of as it can be thought of as a tragedy because you already have something that works really well. But then it allows you to go back and think about processes. I'll be going to processes soon, and this is a big part of it. Organized chaos is something that we have assessed worked really well for us. What I mean by organized chaos is you have things that are organized, and you're doing everything you can to keep it organized. But because you're a small studio working on something for the first time, on a bigger game for the first time, there are things that you couldn't take into account, which means that chaos appears. You want to keep the organized things organized, and you want to keep on iterating on the chaos. If there's a new thing that came up that you weren't expecting and it puts a log in your wheel, so you fall, you want to keep on trying a different approach, perhaps, until it starts working. And if it never starts working, maybe you've got to iterate on a bigger thing. And then, luck. This is something I keep on coming back to every time I think about all of the things that have happened. Luck is such a massive element. Imagine this. You meet people at school. You meet people at a course. It doesn't really matter. And then the people you meet that you will form a team with are going to be your context for a year and a half of making a game, maybe for 5 years of running a studio. If you get really lucky when meeting those people, you're going to have a much better time. But it may very well be that half of those people are not going to be a good fit for the overall context of the studio. And suddenly you find yourself in a position where you have to be working with that, communicating, talking, finding out what is happening, why and where. And the reason why luck is important in the team is you've got the extrinsic influence on you. Every single person has this on themselves. The team influences every single member. Now, with the team, these were things that worked well. These were some of the issues that we had to go over. However, having a small team has been an incredibly interesting experience overall. Let's move on to publishing the game. I do want to stress that this is by far, this is not a guide. Whatever you take away from this one, do not follow any of these steps. Just do it well. Right, so pitch the game early. This is a good thing, by the way. This is a good one. I do think that even now, after having released it, this was one thing that we did well and that worked well for the game as well. pitch it early. Don't wait for a year and a half. You want to validate your idea, because you don't know whether your idea is going to work well with a publisher. And to minimize your risks, you need funding, generally speaking, unless you have a different business idea about the whole thing. You do want to pitch it early. By pitching the game early, you can validate that idea much more quickly. When you start pitching to publishers early, right? So you've got a prototype, you see that it works, and then you create some sort of a playable. A playable is the thing that publishers usually look for. A thing that you'll hear about 80% of the time is, it's a good game, but not really a fit for our portfolio. And that's usually where the communication ends. That's why it's super important to ask and filter. I'm not joking, vast majority of the emails that we received back from publishers were, it's just not a fit for our portfolio. We could have left it there, but we never did. We always followed up with another email and asked, thank you for letting us know. Is there anything else that you can tell us about why it's not a fit for your portfolio? Getting more information from the publisher than just, you've been rejected. Try to squeeze everything you can from that opportunity, because it's going to be an opportunity. It's also super important to filter this, because I think it's important to realize that a publisher, regardless of how big, how famous, how professional, they are always going to be looking at it from the position of themselves, right? They're always going to be there and thinking, is this, how do we work with this? Maybe we just want to be nice to establish a good connection because these guys might come up with a great idea afterwards. Don't just accept everything they say as the truth. Still filter what you get back as feedback from a publisher. In an ideal scenario, you get great constructive feedback that you can re-implement into your game, put it back into the cycle, and move on with a better game. Marketing. We did some marketing. We tried. There were efforts, but overall, at the moment, the game's been released. It's been released since the 31st of August. We have roughly 24 reviews. They're all positive, right? However, because of the marketing efforts that were put out there, nothing really caught on. And this was our first project. We never validated whether it could be the art direction, whether it's the fact that the mechanics are simpler, whether it's that the gameplay is just 2 hours, but then people would find out about it. There's a lot of questions we never answered. This is something that we're taking away for the next project, where validating things early leaves less room for questions. I mean, when going to conferences, the greatest marketing tactic was probably me walking barefoot, because people would sometimes come up to me and say, I've got shoes for you, right? It actually happened. At Gamescom, I got a pair of shoes. And they would remember me, right? And then we self-published the game. Self-publishing was, I suppose, fairly something that you'd expect with an average self-published first project. We launched with 1,300 wish lists. Not a great number by any means. It's super low. We were surprised we got that high, by the way, considering the graphs. We made $1,500 in the first month and a half. Yeah, it's low numbers. In terms of numbers, this was an unsuccessful game. That's the game it was, right? At the same time, it was the best game we could have made, because clearly that's where we were headed, where we landed, and we can take all of that and now do it in a different way. Another thing. Oh, right. That's why it was to the side. Another thing, again, is luck. When you publish the game, maybe you got the right genre at the right time. Maybe you got a genre that no one was interested in, that became interesting by the time you released the game. You couldn't have known. The publishers couldn't have known, but you do release it, and then the algorithm of Steam just starts pushing you. A massive amount of it, again, is luck. And the luck aspect of it was something that in our processes, we weren't interested in thinking about. We just pushed that to the side. This is a screenshot of we abused Notion for keeping notes, and also for working on the game. This is a small screenshot of our of our table with all the publishers that we were contacting. This was in the middle of the process, so we had publishers, we had a massive list of about 75, 80 publishers. We all filtered them and went through them, and we categorized whether it was an investor, publisher, or a middleman, and then whether we were in communication, got in touch, or whether we're keeping them in mind for the next project because they've already responded. The lesson 3 there, we're stacking up, is pitching the game early is by any means a great idea, but the big one that what we got wrong when pitching Cardbob initially was that the playable wasn't good enough yet. If we had waited 2-3 more months, we could have put in more content into the game. That would have possibly gone differently. Can't be sure, but yeah. And then the lesson 4 is with ask and filter and marketing there. But mainly ask and filter, you know, whatever they say, sure. Make sure that you try to filter it in a way that you do get the most important things out of what people say. And this is super important in game design as well. Whenever you get feedback, filter it, get the important things, the things that matter, and ideally implement them, if possible. Right, moving on to processes and tools. I put the tools in there, but that's a good one. So with processes, because you're a small team, if you are in a situation like we were, processes is your bread and butter. If you don't have a very good process for how you make the game, how quickly you're making it, that's going to be super tough. Now, if you've got a person that can do multiple consecutive steps in a given pipeline meaning, let's say that you've got a game with a lot of characters and you've got to create the idea for a character, draw it, model it, implement it, animate it, and put that all together. If you have a person that can take care of multiple consecutive steps, you're reducing the amount of communication that you need to be doing. And every extra step removed from a pipeline improves speed of development. Working smart. People say this a lot, but working smart is a thing that you keep on iterating. I've got another slide where I go in detail with some of the specific things that we used in our processes to work smart. Working smart, another word for this is, or another way of putting it, is getting to a higher quality result faster. That's essentially why you want to do it. One thing that worked super well for us was Notion. At the very beginning, if there's anyone working with Unity, we work with Godot, but there's a thing similar to scriptable objects. We used a lot of those. They're called custom resources in Godot. But then working with a larger data set where you've got enemies and abilities, power-ups and upgrades, you do want to start separating them and seeing them in a table. So we used the Notion Open API and used it for both documentation, but also for all of the databases for enemies, items, power-ups, all of that. And it was living there, it was very easy to edit and see, and then the game would take it and update it. It was a great time saver, fantastic for balancing afterwards. So documentation and databases on Notion. Godot engine is our tool of choice for creating the game. That's got a good story nowadays, doesn't it? And was this a good decision? Yeah, that's a good question still. And then iterate, whatever process you've got. It will never be perfect. You'll always start at a certain level of that process. You do want to go back eventually to process, specifically when you notice that there is time wasted. Go back to it. Imagine it a different way. Change a little piece of that process and try it again. See whether it was better. You really want to go back and there's like again. But, right, so working smart. For example, Cardbob used this texture, that game used this texture for 90% of the game. As you can see, this is an Atlas texture mixed with a trim sheet texture. It's both in one. The entire game uses 90 megabytes of video RAM. When it's at its peak, right? So this texture is used for vast majority of the game. This allowed us to texture things very quickly, get ideas, 3D ideas, out into the game very quickly, right? The iteration speed. Do you want to change what 90% of the game looks like? you change this texture, and you can experiment. You can experiment with those. Also creating shaders. So when you're creating shaders with a single texture, you change that, and that change is shown everywhere. And this is a list of the databases that the final game used from Notion. We had databases for achievements, and all of that was living in Notion with a single click of a button. All of those were updated in the game. Now, what's interesting here was what the situation of Godot, right? So, you know, when we started creating the game, I was like, why are you using Godot, man? It's a terrible idea. No, why? And then, of course, Unity happened, and people started coming up to us like, you were onto something back then, weren't you? All right? That happened. And that was a big lesson for us, because it real-time proved that even if there is something that you can't even imagine happening, it can happen. And it can change the landscape, right? For instance, this has already had an effect. We got contacted by publishers, a brand new team in the Czech Republic that created porting toolset for Godot games. Because of that. Because of September 15th, 12th, they have already created a porting toolset and offered to port our game to Switch, which publishers would have done, but we never landed a deal. So that's already changed that. And Working Smart proved to be the one thing that allowed us to complete the game on schedule. We basically wanted to spend a year or 18 months at most, and Working Smart allowed that. Now, when I say Working Smart, I'm talking about removing paper cuts in your processes. Removing paper cuts. Paper cuts are things that you have to do every time you're going through a process, and there's this little part that you don't like very much. You have to force yourself a little bit. All of those little moments are paper cuts. If possible, removing those paper cuts from your processes, and if you remove enough many of them, you're saving minutes, and then in days, you're saving tens of minutes. And of course, you know, over the span of a project, it's even more. Identify, assess, and solve. Especially in a super small team, one thing that you start noticing is that you notice when something isn't working really well. If you can go through identifying it, assessing it, and trying to solve it, you're essentially allowing your processes to grow together with the team. This was something that we did over the entire span of the project, and it was incomparable. When trying to identify them, assess them, and solve them, if that was done, well, that being done all the time allowed our processes to just become 3 times or 4 times faster than they were at the beginning. So again, iterating is a common word when it comes to processes and just working on things. You really do want to iterate, but don't just iterate on ideas. Iterating on how you communicate and iterating on those processes. It allows you to make it all better. And taking the right shortcuts, right? I think we've all been at a situation where we were talking about an idea and there was a programmer, and the programmer starts implementing it, and it's just it's a high-quality code, but it takes a week and a half, and it's a small thing. Sometimes if you take the right shortcut in the right way, something that could have taken a week and a half, but you get it implemented in just 2 days, the code's not the best. But it's there, and now you can show it to people, you can give it to people to test that idea. That's a massive thing that, from my experience, often gets overlooked, especially when working on a first project. Goal-oriented, but avoiding tunnel vision. You know how it is. We have that goal, and then nothing else matters. The input from the outside gets all removed because we believe that our way is the correct way. And then that tunnel vision usually is to the detriment of the quality of the game, because you're avoiding useful feedback. I do think that avoiding the tunnel vision whilst being goal-oriented allows you to be very flexible, allows you to play around with the process. Right, and then that is right on to the last one, which is remaining playful, creative, and random. What we experienced in our team anyway is that as we had been working on the game long enough, it was almost like working in an office, right? You've been there for like it feels like 5 years already. Every day is the same. And then remembering that there's still that playfulness in you that can put creativity into the game. And the lovely randomness, just say those random ideas to your team. I know you've been working on the game professionally for a year and a half, so random things, they have no place, but allowing the space for that randomness and playfulness to exist allows you to stay motivated, allows you to keep fresh ideas flowing into the game. And sometimes it really needs it. And be lucky. The luck is just, it's everywhere. And it happens, it does happen. Whenever you're in a process, whenever you've got a team, you're working on the game, you've got an idea, sometimes there's just that super random bit of luck, and it happens, and you know it. When it happens, you know, you're like, this was just super lucky, never going to happen again, but I'm super glad that it did. Right. We've got motivation. This was something that, from personal experience, again, this is something that we went through, is extremely important. Because when you're not funded, you grit your teeth and you decide, yeah, I'll make our first game. There's no way I'm not. This is what we're doing. Motivation can disappear super quickly. I think the one thing that solved it in our team is that I started talking to my team, and we went super deep into this. This is a super simple question, but why do you make games? In our case, it was easy to forget because we were so deep into processes and thinking about it and making the game the best we could, and everything was working super well. So, you know, the content was being created, designs were being implemented, and suddenly we lost the sight of why we make games. And at first, even to my teammates, this was a simple question. But once we started talking about it, we started discovering things, and it was asking this question, going deeper into this question, is what allowed us to stay together as a team and find motivation again, so to speak. That was really nice, by the way. I wasn't expecting it from that question to work so well, but it was a game it was a question that was fantastic, actually. Now, in hindsight, when I go back to it, I see the real value of that question. It was fantastic that it worked out. This is my favorite, my personal favorite, specifically in a small team. I think it's important that you invest time where necessary, but also where it matters for you, right? So you're making a game. You've got to get a prototype out there by the end of the following Friday. However, you know, you're not feeling super motivated, the energy's leaving you, and you know that there's this little thing that you could do on the side. It's very important that you do it. If you grind yourself to the bone, working on almost an arbitrary deadline, they're not always arbitrary, but sometimes they are, but regardless of whether it is or not, still take that time and work on something where you have this momentary passion. It appears in you, you can feel it, you know this is going to be great. Spend that time, do it, come back to working on your project, refreshed, and you know, you feel like you just took a breath of fresh air. And of course, be kind to yourself. You know, I'm sure this is something we all go through, but you're working on your game, you're going through all the little updates, and you're implementing things, and you're modeling new things. It looks better than it ever did before. But then you go on Twitter, and the first GIF you see is something that is 1,000,000 times better than you could ever make. And you go, right, good, I suppose that's nice. This is a big part of it, right? We can all get there, sure, but remembering that this is just the way it is, right? You're working on a game, and also because you've been working for so long, sometimes it's very difficult to see it objectively, whether, you know, what it looks like. So it's easy to see other things and get demotivated because of how competitive this zone is, by the way. The stuff people make online, that's difficult to see sometimes, but it is beautiful, of course. Right. Now then, I believe we've got almost the last slide here. I did sprint through it, but I would like to condense all of that into just 6 points, and that is, if you feel something isn't right about your game, investigate right away. The reason why I'm saying this is because this is something that happened to us, and I have seen it happen to other people as well. And that is that you're stuck in thinking that this is the only thing you can do. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I heard someone mentioned it as the main project syndrome. That's what they call it. I don't know how popular that term is, but regardless, don't be afraid of really taking a big step back from your idea, even if it's the best idea you've ever had, if you notice that something might not be right about your game. Second thing is, titles matter. we made a grave mistake there, right? We put revival in there. But we thought, yeah, this is going to be great. This is going to work like magic. It didn't. And still, misleading words in games they are misleading. But what this is trying to say is, be careful when naming your game. It's also a marketing tool, because people will be searching for it. Pitching early is great, but you need to hit a good playable. What is a good playable is a super difficult question. I've talked about what is a good playable with a lot of people, and it's just, in short, it is a version of your game. It's not a vertical slice, it's not a beta final, it's not an alpha, it is a version that will convince the publisher to fund your game. Where our mistake there was that we were pitching the game a little too early. Our game kept on improving, but the first pitches that we also chose our favorite publishers at the very beginning. I think that could have been the other way around. Where we first pick up experience, we know a little bit more about the process of pitching a game, and then once we've picked up that experience, once we've also iterated on the process of what it's like to be pitching a game, that is when we go to our top 5, for example. And then number 4 is do not spread marketing efforts thin. This was, now in hindsight, this is something where we had an issue in the marketing department, because we were all over the place. We were on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, and well, Discord, of course, but we're everywhere, right? And on none of those places were we able to hit the right tone. The most successful marketing push we ever did was when the game was released. We went on to Slovak subreddit, and we said, we're a Slovak game studio, we're releasing the game, AMA. And that worked really well. It hit the wrong tone. It actually worked out super well, but that was the only one, right? Apart from that, all of the efforts where we were showing the game, saying the best things about, well, what we thought were accurate representations of what the people could be interested in, those never landed really well. And yeah, not spreading those marketing efforts thin is something that would have made it better. Focus on 1-2 platforms at most, do those well, focus on them, understand them better. And experiment more. The unthinkable can happen. That was the interesting. You know what? I didn't think something like that could happen. I really didn't. I didn't think. I've never seen anything like it in my life in the game development scene either. The landscape just changed overnight. Of course, it's stable now. I'm not. Don't take this that I'm saying that it's the end of. Not at all. This is not the end of an engine. But they were capable of completely changing the landscape in a single moment, right? It just did 180. And that was unforeseeable, I suppose. And then number 6 is iterate on processes that allow you to get to a higher quality result faster. The one thing that keeps on being true over and over again is whenever you've got a small team, processes are the things that get you there. They get you to the finish line. Whatever process you have, iterate on them. Maybe someone else could be doing a different thing. Maybe there's communication that could improve. Maybe it's a tool issue. Maybe if you use a different tool, it'll work smoother. Yeah, yeah. You'll see. I'm sure once you start going through it, that's that's what you'll discover, that there's a lot that you can iterate on. And with that, I thank you. I did sprint, that was half an hour. Thank you very much.
One, two. Are there any questions? If you have a question, please raise your hand, or maybe use our Slido to post some questions in there. I think we already have some.
No,
so let's maybe start.
That's for the previous one, I think.
Oh,
yes, that's for the previous one.
So I see a raised hand over there.
Yes, yes. I'm not a programmer, but I program. So, you know, I never went through any official education in terms of programming, but as our team kept on evolving, as it kept on losing members, it started being more important for someone to do programming as well. And you see, I've noticed that because of my passion for games, I forget about things. So, for example, I forgot about the fact that programming could be difficult, and I just went and I explored that angle of development, and I did my best. I primarily focus just on the language that is used in Godot, which is GD script, which syntactically looks like Python. However, one thing that I've noticed is, you know, it's a fairly easy, straightforward language. However, thanks to me going through that language, picking up, for example, C# in Unity was extremely easy. Yeah. Sorry? Your next game gonna be on Unity? No. We're sticking to Godot. I had used Unity at a couple of game jams because I wanted to know what it's like developing a game in a different engine. And you don't put Unreal Engine? Nah, no. The reason why we're not thinking about switching an engine because we've analyzed the options that we have, and we've also cross-referenced that with the kinds of games we want to make. And we do know that any graphical fidelity offered to us through Unreal would be wasted on the games we want to be making. Similarly to Unity, where we know that everything we need for our games and the size of games we need, the size of games that we want to be making, Godot is everything we need. The moment we hit a technical limitation is also the moment when we'll start thinking about, you know, going over to a different solution. Welcome.
So a question from Slido. Since you're in such a small team, I suppose you are very busy with work. How do you manage the work and life balance?
Whoa, that's a tough one. The main issue that I face in life is that I forget about time very often because I find it so fun to be working, right? Which probably makes me a workaholic, but it is fun. In past, I have called myself a healthy workaholic. I don't know if that exists, but I have coined that about myself. Work-life balance, well, I've got a dog, which means that at the very least, I do walk twice a day. I have to. I hope that answers the question. If not, if there's a, you know, if there's further information that is necessary, let me know. And we've got this one as well. That's the new one.
Oh, yeah. There was a raised hand.
Yeah. So you mentioned the processes are very important.
Yeah.
You also said that you now work in a very small team of like 3 people.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with cases where, for example, some key member of the team decides to leave?
Well, I sit down and think about it, and then I go for a walk with my dog.
But do your processes allow you to easily switch a team member?
Well, it would depend. It would depend on which team member leaves. It would depend on who leaves and what processes are being affected by them leaving. And then you take a step back. Well, I would take... This is usually what happens. We take a step back, we take a look at what has been affected by a core team member leaving, and we analyze, what does this mean? Does this mean we need someone else in the team who has the skill but hasn't been doing it to take on that responsibility now? Or does it mean we need a new person? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's about their skills, but what about maybe some kind of information related to the specific project that only that person had because you maybe didn't document your code enough? Or
That's that's taken care of by documentation processes, right? And also in a small team, everyone knows everything. You talk all the time. You know the people very well, and whenever you're talking about a project, you really talk about the project. You talk about every aspect of the project. So information is really there, and we've always had documentation regarding, at the very least, the most important things. So it's never been an issue.
So what was the podcast that you mentioned?
The podcast.
You mentioned the podcast.
Make a Game with Matt Hackett was the name of the podcast. It's a guy, Matt Hackett, and he invites people, and he's also making a game. And he's been in the industry for a while, and he's now documenting his journey.
So have you ever had a thought of ditching your small studio and joining a big one?
Oh no, never even crossed my mind. By the way, this is super interesting. I must be a masochist of some sort, but working in a small team is so vivid. You get, when you're working with an issue, you're working with an issue with a person that you know well. You can go deep into that, and resolving any issue in a small team feels different. It's not the sort of a thing that you can just easily walk away from. Of course you can, but it will still be there sitting. So it's so rewarding, and then also when you see how incredibly well it works when it works, that's something I appreciate so much. I've never even considered leaving Mad Cookies.
Okay, so another question, I think, would be, where is the best place to put your first game, not to make money, but to get feedback? So, I don't know, maybe before releasing the game?
Right. I would, from my current knowledge, I don't think I am an authority on this in any way, but from the stories I've heard that were successful is releasing a demo on itch, if it's a good replayable demo, can go a super long way. That can work really well because people do enjoy also higher quality demos on itch. So if it's highly replayable, you can get a lot of feedback on itch and then eventually transfer that over to another platform if need be. Ideally you have a really good, big community and you send out a link for a demo and you say, go play test it. That's the ideal situation. But I do think that itch could be an interesting choice.
You should mention, according to this message, your Mad Cookies Discord server. Right.
Yeah. The big community I was talking about. At the moment, we've got a Discord server of about, I don't know, 300 people. But we do have a Discord server. Yep.
Okay, so this is an interesting question.
Yep.
If you like to answer it. Did you pay your teammates, and how do you handle money sharing?
Well, we're quite organic when it comes to this. So we founded the company together. We were in a co-founder sort of setup, so to speak. Because we also did client work, the way we split the money was always based on who worked on what, right? So, for example, if I was not part of a project, I wouldn't be able to claim half of the money that we got from them. That wouldn't make any sense. And so, we tried also Google Sheets. That one, it got super complicated eventually, by the way. But yeah, it was always split according to people working on those projects.
Okay. And so let's make this the last question. A bit more lighthearted. What are your favorite games?
My favorite games. My most recent favorite game that I can't put down is Into the Breach. It's just not getting old anytime soon. I'll just go with Into the Breach. At the moment, my head is full of Into the Breach. So there we are. And, by the way, Prince of Persia.
Which one?
First one. I will never forget the terror I felt falling down on those spikes as a small boy. I was watching my brother play it, and I was like, that looks fun. And then when I played it, it was a whole different experience. And I remember I felt terrible, but it was amazing.
All right, Krystof. So thank you very much for a very insightful and inspiring presentation. And
thank you.
I guess you can still talk to Krystof throughout the whole Game Days event. He'll be here.
Yep.
So if you would like to get some more insight, definitely get in touch.